Somewhere in your home right now, there is a machine whose only job is to lie to your body. It tells your skin that it is spring. It has been telling that same lie so consistently, for so many summers in a row, that the ancient machinery inside you built to survive real heat has quietly begun powering down from disuse. You call that comfort. Your ancestors would have recognized it as something closer to a slow disarming. Because there is a story almost everyone believes about early humans and heat, and it is wrong in a very specific way. The story says they endured it, that they suffered through the blistering middle of the day, pressed into whatever thin shade the landscape offered, counting the hours until the sun loosened its grip. That heat was the enemy, and that survival meant hiding. But the real answer is far stranger. Your ancestors did not hide from the hottest hours of the day. They waited for them. They watched the sun climb toward the top of the sky, and when the air finally turned hostile enough to flatten every other large animal on the savanna, they stood up and walked directly into it. Not out of desperation, out of strategy, because to them that heat was not a threat. It was the only advantage they had. To understand why, you have to understand something genuinely bizarre about the skin you are sitting in right now. You are carrying somewhere between 2 and 4 million sweat glands. They are threaded through almost every square centimeter of your body, on your back, your forearms, the tops of your feet. No other mammal on Earth comes close. A chimpanzee has sweat glands too, but most of them are the wrong kind and in the wrong places, and they cannot be deployed the way yours can. Pound for pound, your species produces more than twice as much sweat as any other animal alive. Think about how strange that is as an evolutionary decision. Water is the most precious substance on a savanna. Every liter is paid for in risk, in walking, in exposure at a watering hole where predators wait, and yet your ancestors evolved a body that throws water away by the liter deliberately through millions of tiny holes in the skin. Nature does not build something that expensive by accident. It builds it because the payoff is enormous. The payoff is this. Nearly every other large mammal cools itself by panting. Panting works, but it has a fatal design flaw. It uses the same equipment as breathing, and it competes with the breathing an animal needs to do while running hard. A galloping antelope cannot pant properly and gallop properly at the same time. Its lungs have to choose. Yours never have to choose. Your cooling system runs on the outside of your body, completely independent of your lungs. You can sprint and cool at the same time. You can breathe entirely for oxygen while your skin handles the temperature, and the two systems never interfere with each other. Now add the second piece. You are almost hairless, and that is not a cosmetic accident. Fur traps a layer of still air against the skin. Sweat produced underneath fur cannot evaporate efficiently, and evaporation is the entire point. Without evaporation, sweat is just wasted water running down a leg. Your bare skin lets every drop convert straight into cooling. The British physiologist Peter Wheeler spent years working through the thermal mathematics of this, and he argued something that reframes the whole picture. Standing upright came first. A body standing on 2 legs at midday exposes far less of itself to direct overhead sun than a body on 4 legs, and it lifts most of its surface up into the moving air above the baking ground. Only once your ancestors were upright did losing the fur and gaining the sweat glands start to make sense. Bipedalism was not just about walking, it was about cooling. Nina Jablonski, who has spent her career studying human skin, describes what came next as one of the most underrated transformations in the entire human story. Losing the fur solved the cooling problem and created a new one immediately. Bare skin under equatorial sun is skin under attack, so pigmentation deepened, not for appearance and not for warmth, but as biological shielding for a body that had traded its coat for a radiator. The dark skin of early African humans and the sweat glands beneath it are the same adaptation, 2 halves of one solution to one problem. Heat did not just shape how your ancestors hunted, it shaped what they looked like. So what did they do with a body like that? They used it to run animals to death. This is not speculation, and it is not a thought experiment. It has been filmed. Louis Liebenberg spent years in the central Kalahari with Axo and Gui hunters from Lone Tree, Beer, and Zaid, documenting a hunting method most anthropologists assumed had disappeared entirely. The hunters would choose the hottest part of the day, when air temperatures sat somewhere between 39 and 42 degrees Celsius. They would select a kudu, an animal far faster than any human being, and then they would simply begin following it. The kudu would bolt. It would open a huge gap almost immediately, disappear from view, and stop to rest in whatever shade it could find, panting hard to shed heat. Then the hunters would arrive. The kudu would bolt again before it had finished cooling, and again the hunters would arrive. And again. Each sprint loaded more heat into the animal's body, and each interruption denied it the time it needed to unload that heat. The numbers Liebenberg recorded are difficult to absorb. One successful hunt in 1998 covered 35 kilometers in 3 hours and 35 minutes. Others ran 25 and 33 kilometers across 4 and 5 hours. In midday, desert heat. On foot. And here is the part that matters most. The kudu did not die of exhaustion in the way you might imagine. It died of temperature. A large mammal's core temperature becomes lethal somewhere around 42 to 44 degrees. A human being's lethal ceiling sits slightly lower, near 41.6. Your ancestors were running a race in which they were closer to their own limit than the animal was to its own. They won anyway. They won because they could shed heat while moving, and the kudu could not. The animal was faster in every single sprint, and lost every single time, because speed was never the variable that decided the outcome. Ask yourself what that means about the species you belong to. Your ancestors did not outfight the fastest animals on the savanna. They did not outclimb them or outmuscle them. They outcooled them. The single most defining physical talent of early humans was not strength or speed. It was thermal patience. Daniel Lieberman and Dennis Bramble laid out the wider version of this argument in a landmark paper, tracing it through the skeleton itself. The long, springy tendons in your leg, the enlarged gluteal muscles that stabilize your torso only when running, not walking. The nuchal ligament at the back of your neck that keeps your head steady while your body pounds beneath it. None of these are walking adaptations. They are running adaptations, and they appear in the fossil record at almost exactly the moment your ancestors moved out into open, hot country. And the hunting was only the sharp edge of it. The rest of the day was engineered around heat just as deliberately. Water was located and memorized across enormous distances because a body that sweats by the liter must drink by the liter. Movement was scheduled. Shade was rationed. Children learned the thermal map of a landscape the way you learned street names. And none of it felt like hardship, because none of it was optional. Heat was not an event that happened to them. It was the medium they lived inside. Your body is not a body that happens to be able to run in heat. It is a body that was designed around it. So what happened? Because if that is your inheritance, the obvious question is why a heat wave now fills hospitals and morgues in cities full of people carrying the exact same equipment. The answer is not that your genes changed. 4 generations is nothing in evolutionary time. Your sweat glands are still there. All 2 to 4 million of them are sitting under your skin right now, fully functional, waiting. The answer is that they were never switched on. Heat tolerance is not a fixed property you either have or lack. It is a trained state, and physiologists have mapped exactly how it develops. Give a human body repeated exposure to heat, and within 10 to 14 days, something remarkable happens. Blood plasma volume expands, giving the heart more fluid to work with. Sweating begins earlier, at a lower core temperature, so cooling starts before the situation becomes dangerous. And the sweat itself changes chemically, becoming more dilute as the body learns to hold onto sodium instead of pouring it out. That is a fully acclimatized human. That was the default state of every person who ever lived before the 20th century. It is almost certainly not your state, and the evidence for that shows up in a pattern epidemiologists have documented for decades and still find unsettling. The first serious heat wave of a summer kills significantly more people than a later heat wave of exactly the same temperature. Same thermometer reading, same city, far more deaths. Nothing about the weather changed. What changed was that by August, bodies had been given a few weeks to remember what they were. Do you see the shape of what has happened here? Air conditioning is one of the most effective life-saving technologies ever invented, and it plainly saves lives during extreme events. But it also holds your body in a permanent artificial spring. Every day you spend inside 22 degrees is a day your sweat response is not being trained, your plasma volume is not being expanded. Your sodium conservation is not being rehearsed. You have inherited the finest evaporative cooling system in the animal kingdom, and you have spent your entire life keeping it in the box. There is a limit past which none of this helps, and it is worth naming honestly. When humidity climbs high enough that sweat can no longer evaporate at all, the whole system stops working no matter how well trained it is. The evaporation is the mechanism. Take that away, and even a perfectly acclimatized human being sitting in shade with unlimited water cannot cool down. Those conditions used to be almost theoretical. They are beginning to appear in the real world, and that is a problem no amount of ancestral toughness can solve. But between the air-conditioned room and that hard physical ceiling lies an enormous range of heat that your body was specifically built to handle and has simply never been asked to. Your ancestors walked into 42 degrees and came home with a coup d'eau. Not because they were braver than you, because their bodies had been switched on since childhood, and yours has been waiting for an invitation that never came. So tonight, when you reach for the machine in your home, understand what you are actually choosing. There is nothing wrong with the choice. But it is a choice and it has a cost. And the cost is paid in a capacity you cannot see disappearing. Somewhere in your home right now, there is a machine whose only job is to lie to your body. The strange part is not that it lies. The strange part is that your body, carrying 4 million sweat glands and 2 million years of desert engineering, still believes it.